Welcome to the Joyful Mate podcast. Join your joyful journey mentor Anthony Hartcher as we explore the path to inner joy and fulfillment. Each episode we dive into the science of happiness, share personal insights, and invite you to be part of this interactive book writing adventure. Let's embark on this journey together. Let's make it happiness part of your everyday. Enjoy season 2 and note the improvements on season 1. Improved audio quality, making progress towards my happiness goal of book writing adventures. Welcome back to another episode of Joyful Mate, episode 9, actually episode 10, and this is on embracing simplicity. So this is a good way to really experience more joy and happiness. I've grown up with simplicity, which I'm fortunate. I think it's being fortunate. Some people might think it's unfortunate. So simplicity in the sense of really just doing life with less. And I think what can happen with commercialization, consumerism, is it encourages us to buy more and more and more. And it drives this behavior of thinking that we need more to feel fulfilled, like it's filling a void. And so we can get into this consumerism cycle where we're going to buy things, and it initially we have that wow factor, that's curiosity or that surprise, and it's a new sort of toy, and it's very much it's very fleeting in terms of feeling satisfied or fulfilled, or a moment of happiness when you have that toy. But obviously over a period of time, after having or acquiring that new product or whatever it is, then it deteriorates. The surprise, that element is gone, the fact that you've got it and you're looking for the next thing. And so we can get really stuck in this consumer cycle and commercialization, and we think we need more and more and more, and we're just constantly chasing this happiness. Whereas if you're out of that cycle, you can feel very satisfied and fulfilled with what you have. It brings up the term gratitude and how gratitude is linked to happiness. For me, being brought up with a very simple life, like not really, parents weren't buying me things all the time, and I had to earn things. And I saw my parents as not really just acquiring things just for the sake of acquiring, new toys. They weren't buying their new toys. They, obviously brought us things for birthday and Christmas, but outside of that, there wasn't much gifting. And so we really got used to appreciating what we had and really utilizing that and enjoying it and embracing it, and not really expecting another thing, just thinking, well, yeah, this is what it is. And so I really grew up with this sense of not having much and not needing much and not wanting much. And I think that's much harder and difficult today, because if you look at, I guess, the growth in affluence of society, we have a lot more to give. And so I guess when I was growing up, our parents, it was harder. I guess they didn't have the affluence that we experience today. And therefore, they're giving less. Whereas in today's world, I think there's a lot more giving and a lot more receiving. However, that's driving expectations to thinking, how I get fulfillment or happiness is every time I receive a new toy or something to be curious about, or something to enjoy for a period of time. And I think this is very much like with technology. Technology is constantly being upgraded in faster cycles, and we want the latest. We want the latest gadget. We want the latest toy to play with. And we can get very tied into the next cycle. When's the next cycle? When's the next new thing coming? I want it. And so this can really drive a inner desire to seek that form of happiness, but it's very unfulfilling and very fleeting. It's very short periods of time and doesn't provide that sort of lasting fulfillment. And we don't appreciate what we have because we're looking for the next thing. What's the next thing? What's the next thing on my radar? And lacking the appreciation for what you have. And this, when I traveled throughout Asia and certainly the more developing world, I've seen how, like, if you look at them, they really just appreciate the simplicity things, and they're not looking for anything extra. They just appreciate what they have, very grateful, and just experience life. They're more present. They're not looking into the future for what's my next acquisition, what am I going to buy next, what I'm going to accumulate next. They're not looking for that, and they don't tie their self-worth to possessions. They don't tie their self-worth to wealth. They don't tie their identity to wealth. And they're very much getting comfortable for who they are, and just appreciating life as it is. Whereas I think in a more affluent society, we get carried away with highlight reels, successes, seeing acquisitions, and getting a sense of unfulfilled, seeing that other people have this and I don't, and therefore I feel unfulfilled. And that can drive, I guess, a reverse in terms of experiencing less happiness because you're constantly comparing yourself to others and they're on this acquisition trail and creating wealth. Whereas I've noticed in these developing nations, they've got this level of fairness and most people are the same. And so their comparison is, well, my friend has just got a roof over their head, they get fed, they might go to school, they play, they do everything the same as me. And so they're not really experiencing voids by comparison. They're not like, whereas in our society, we can look at such and such down the road, they have this and I don't. Therefore, I'm missing something. I feel unfulfilled. And I'll only feel fulfilled if I get what such and such down the road has, and that may not be possible. And so you can constantly have this sense of unfulfillment, and such down the road constantly is getting the latest and greatest and new things. And so I've recognized in these developing countries that when there's more equity, more fairness, there's obviously less comparison, and it's all about just experiencing life as it is. Whereas what I see in the more affluent societies, and certainly it is the spread, the gap between the people, the have and the have-nots, or the people that have everything and the ones that don't have much. And I think that's really difficult for those that don't have much because they're comparing themselves to those that have a lot and thinking that they're missing out on something in life. But in actual fact, when you look at interviews or biographies, autobiographies of the ones that have a lot, they feel just as unsatisfied as those that don't have much. And so the accumulation of possessions, as I just mentioned, provides some sort of temporary, fleeting moments of joy, fulfillment, happiness, satisfaction. However, it's not lasting. And however, what I've observed in nations that don't have as much, or these developing nations where there's more equity, more fairness, more people around the same wealth line or whatever, is they just experience life as it is and take each day as it comes. And so they're way more present, and I think they just appreciate what they have and really embrace life for what it has to offer, as opposed to thinking that, being in this constant state of comparison and thinking I'm missing something and I'm not experiencing life, and therefore I can't enjoy life unless I have what such and such down the road has got. And so this ties in, like, simplicity is easy to do when everyone else has a simple life around you. However, it's quite difficult when you're talking to others or that you see others possess things that you don't have. And that can drive an immediate sense of, I don't have that, therefore I'm not living life, or I'm not experiencing a full life. But it's a real distortion of reality, because those people that have that aren't appreciating that, and they want the next thing. And so they don't feel fulfilled either. So both parties are sort of, one party's experiencing all the acquisitions of these new gadgets, toys, whatever they may be, possessions. However, they're not appreciating them, and they're thinking that there's got to be something more to life, and they're looking for the next thing. Whereas those that don't have it are looking at those that have it and thinking there's something missing. And so this inequity, or in around wealth and the whole commercialization, consumerism cycles can really drive a lot of dissatisfaction in life. And it's really important to disconnect from that. And for me, as much as I'll compare, like, I think that there's healthy comparisons when you're thinking that, like, you're admiring someone and they lift your standards. So I think it's sort of, well, I'm admiring that talent. That talent is important for me to acquire. I'm going to acquire it in my way, do it my way. However, it's going to lift my standard, lift the bar in terms of how I do things. And that's like a more healthy comparison, because it's driving you to be a better person. What it is, the comparison that you don't want is the comparison where you're comparing yourself to someone else and feeling inadequate, feeling that you're not enough, and that lowers your self-worth, self-esteem. So that's unhealthy, because you're just focusing on the void. Whereas if you ignore the void and just think, wow, that's fantastic that I've been able to go to that level. How can I take myself to the next level? So it's then going back inwards and working on yourself to up your standards and do it in your unique way, because you're completely different to them. And this is why I don't like the comparison thing, is they're a unique individual, have a unique genome, they have unique values in terms of what's important to them. You have your unique genome, you have your unique values, and your role and what's going to drive more satisfaction within you is if you see and notice and recognize the improvement in you. Whereas you're constantly doing comparison, you're not recognizing your progress. You're just noticing the gap between you and them, and you're never going to be them. And so it's a real futile sort of comparison, and it only drives inadequacies and feeling that there's a bigger void in your life and that you're missing something, and that therefore happiness will only happen if I achieve what they've achieved. So that comparison is taking you away from yourself, and you're focusing on things out of your control. Whereas if you focus inwards and focus on what you can do about improving yourself and elevating your standard, that's within your control. And in measuring yourself about, how we, like for me, like in doing this podcast, it's how do I improve each episode? How do I better articulate my messages? How do I construct a better podcast? And so this is me looking to how I improve myself. I don't compare myself to Joe Rogan or Andrew Huberman, for example, because they're unique species, human beings, and they have their uniqueness. I've got my uniqueness. I'm going to focus on my way and my strengths, and it's all about me progressing myself and upping my standards. And when I think, have I improved on the last podcast? Have I improved on episode 9? Have I implemented what I said I wanted to implement in terms of improvements? Yes. Well, that's recognizing my progress towards excelling, towards mastery, towards developing myself, because ultimately that's my purpose on planet Earth, is to be the best version of myself. And that's never ending. And so I just constantly keep working at that. But I recognize the progress that I've made along the way, and that's fulfilling, is that reflection. And this brings me back to another episode where I talked about when you're super busy and not reflecting, is that you're not recognizing and acknowledging your progress. You're just keep chasing things and chasing that void, and that is, in a sense, that can get very difficult if you're not acknowledging your wins and successes along the way and your milestones. because you're just focusing on the gap, what you don't have, and that can bring a sense of constant unfulfillment. Whereas if you're recognizing and expressing gratitude and thanks for the progress you've made and the contribution of others that have supported you, then you express that gratitude. That's a sense of fulfillment. That's a sense of joy. That's a sense of happiness and contentment. Whereas if you focus on the gap, then you're always going to experience less fulfillment, less gratitude, less happiness. So it's really important in relation to comparison that you just compare yourself to you yesterday or you the last hour, and it's just a constant work on self, but acknowledging the progress you're making, but don't acknowledge that with respect to others. You can look up to them and admire what they've achieved and how they've worked towards their mastery and think, that inspires me to lift my mastery, but don't focus on their successes and think you're inadequate and you don't have what they have. You're a different human being and you have your uniqueness, and you need to discover life in your way and go on your journey. But it's good to have those inspirations around you to lift your standard, but you don't want to be lifting your standard and comparing your standard to their standard, because you're different to them. You're never going to be them. So that's a really important point. Is the comparison is great when it lifts you, but if you're comparing yourself and constantly just focusing on gaps and inadequacy and not working on yourself and not making progress yourself and not working on what you can control, then that's going to be very unfulfilling, and that's going to lead to less amount of happiness, less experiences of happiness. Whereas if you focus on what you can control and acknowledge that progress you're making towards your bigger goal, then that's fulfilling. That's where you're going to experience more joy and happiness. So just getting back to, obviously went on a bit of a tangent with comparison, but I think that's helpful because that's what we contend with when we have inequities within society, when you've got the haves and the have-nots, and both end up quite dissatisfied because, as I said, the haves are looking for the next thing and not being grateful for what they have and acknowledging that, and being sad. They want the next thing, and that because they don't have the next thing, they feel discontented, they feel unhappy, they feel that there's a void. Same with the have-nots. They compare themselves to the haves and think, I don't have that, therefore I'm not living life, or I can't experience life because I don't have what they have. And when you ultimately get down to it, what I've learned from my travels through the developed world is they've got more equity. Mind you, the inequity's been created, but they've got more equity. They do less comparison, or when they do a comparison, they feel that they're the same as everyone else because most of the people around them have similar possessions or they don't have. But I think the harder thing for these developed nations today is social media, because then they're comparing their life to someone in the Western world that has a lot more. And so, yes, that can be motivating in terms of aspiring. As I said, you could use that as inspiration, but then if you're constantly comparing what you have and they have, then that's going to be quite disheartening. But if you're focusing on lifting your standards, as I said before, then that's something that you can gain more fulfillment, gain more moments of happiness, joy, experiencing contentment, and feeling fulfilled. So in wrapping up this episode, it's really important that you simplify your life in terms of it's acknowledging what you have, acknowledging where you've come from, acknowledging your progress, and that derives more contentment and fulfillment. Obviously, you've got a journey to where you want to go to, but that journey is just you improving on yesterday. It's not just focusing on this huge gap of where you want to be and where you're not. It's just focusing on that incremental progress that you're doing that's taking you in that direction. And I think this will be helpful in terms of being able to focus on self, is not look at highlight reels all the time of other people's lives, because you're just seeing the end result. You're not seeing the work in progress, you're not seeing the behind the scenes. And that's what I'm sharing in this podcast, is the behind the scenes, the work in progress, so that you can go on your journey with me and focus on your goals and just recognize your successes, your progresses, and are you improving, moving in the right direction? Are you meeting your KPIs in relation to your improvement, but not that comparison of where I am and someone else is? So that comparison, again, can be used as fuel, but it can be detrimental when you're thinking that you're missing out on something and you're not experiencing life. You're experiencing life. You're just not present to experience the fulfillment that life has to offer in that moment. And every moment is an absolute gem. There's beauty everywhere, all around you. It's just that if you're focusing on gaps, you're focusing on what you're missing, and that leads to constant missing what's currently around you and what you've currently achieved and your current progress. You're disregarding that. And so it's really important to allow that reflective time each day to reflect on your progress, to reflect on what you set out to achieve, and then reflect on, if it didn't happen, why didn't it happen? What can you do about it tomorrow? So it's about corrective action as opposed to beating yourself up and thinking, oh, you should have done that, but you didn't. It's sort of, well, what got in the way? How come that got in the way? And it's just altering your behaviors based on your assessment and how you want to improve. And if you're constantly doing this reflection, and that requires slowing down and not being so busy, then you express more gratitude, you acknowledge your wins, and you acknowledge your progress, and that it brings you inner joy. It brings you that moment of, I feel good, I feel content, I feel satisfied, I feel fulfilled. And if you're doing that every day, you can experience that. However, if you're on social media in the evening and not doing your own reflection time about yourself and your progress and about being a better version of you, then only on social media you can just look at highlight reels and then think, oh, I didn't achieve that today. Look at that. Look what they've done. Look at that milestone. And it just drives inadequacies within you, drives disappointment within you, and unfulfillment and big voids. And that can be really depressing. So don't look at the highlight reels of others in the evening. Focus on your highlight reel. Focus on your highlight reel, which is you reflecting on your day, what went well, acknowledging that, expressing gratitude for those that have contributed to you achieving what you achieved, acknowledging all those support people around you, and then reflecting on that didn't happen, and then asking yourself, why didn't that happen? Was it, and it could be a perfectly good reason as to why it didn't happen, but just acknowledging how you're going to make that happen if it's a really important action the next day. And it's then, getting that on number one on the priority list and tackling that first. And then, reflecting, I didn't do it 2 days ago. I said I was going to do it the next day. Yes, I did it the next day. And this will drive this contentment with each day. And it's through reflective practices. And that reflective practices is focusing on your progress, not other people's progress. So in wrapping this up, it's focusing at the end of the day on your highlight reels and not scrolling through social media looking at other people's highlight reels. Focusing on your highlight reels, acknowledging them, expressing gratitude to yourself, to those around, to the universe, everyone, for the contribution they made to you helping to achieve that milestone. Focusing on what didn't happen, how come it didn't happen, how can I improve on this tomorrow when I wake up. And so this is a great way to wrap up the day because it brings completeness to the soul. It makes you feel filled, okay, and not empty. If you're looking at highlight reels, you go to bed feeling depressed, empty, that's going to affect your night's sleep. You go to bed focusing on your highlight reels, giving acknowledgement and gratitude, you will go to bed feeling fulfilled, content, satisfied, experiencing that inner joy. and that feeling of happiness. So that's it for episode 10. Would really appreciate if you found this valuable. Please share it with others. As I said, I'm not a writer. I'm a speaker, and I'm speaking or writing a book through speaking. So this is my journey. Please share it, and I want you to go on your journey. So the takeaway for you is to not only implement what you learn, but also focus on your goals and work on the behind the scenes. And that's what you want to be working on, the behind the scenes. And then acknowledging your wins every day. Acknowledging your wins every day, or even after doing an activity, just acknowledging it and expressing appreciation. That will bring fulfillment and momentum forward. Okay, because it lifts you. And the only comparison is fuel. So you only want to do the comparison and acknowledge, well done to them, and express that gratitude towards them to inspire you to lift your standards within you, but not compared to them. So that's it for episode 10. Thank you again for listening, and share it with others that would find value in this episode. Thank you.